Hey, what's up? Another episode of Gonna See My Friends podcast where we just kind of talk movies and with your buddies, with my buddies. And today we have a new face on the podcast, which we kind of have. I don't know, it's just kind of acquaintances so far, but we play. It's my softball buddy, actually, I should
Softball
say,
buddy.
John Hansen. And is that Hansen with SON or SEN?
SEN, the right way.
Okay, cool. All right.
JOHN.
Yeah, I got that one. And this guy, yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself. He's an independent producer or does some
Yeah.
indie movies. So tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about that.
So over the last, I guess it's 12 years now, I've been involved in a handful of projects, mostly as a producer and executive producer. I think I'm up to 6 indie films now, and we're working on pre-production on the 7th.
Oh, wow.
So a couple of the titles, A True Story, that had John Grice and Katrina Bowden in it, Malcolm Goodwin, and one of my best friends, Cameron Fife, is one of the writers and stars in the film. That was the first film that got me started in the industry. And then Population Zero is another one, Castle in the Ground. And then probably the biggest film I've done was in 23, and that's called King Tide.
Yeah, we were just talking about that.
Yeah. And so that one is, pretty big budget. Again, it's indie, but beautifully shot, really well acted. It's a cool film. That's probably, that's the one that I'm proudest to be a part of. Other than the kind of the first one, which was, like I said, one of my best friend's films.
Yeah.
And I was really involved with that one. And from start to finish, we shot it in 2.5 weeks, guerrilla style in LA,
Yeah.
no permits. Yeah, it was fun. And it's actually the side bit. It's how I met my wife,
Oh,
because
okay.
I was down for the filming. She lived in
Yeah.
Hermosa, and we bumped into each other in Hermosa. So
Nice.
I have that film to, my 3 kids are around because of that film.
Oh, nice, dude. That's awesome. This kind of sounds like Harvey Korman.
Okay.
And we did a film with him when I went to the Academy of Art in
Yeah.
San Francisco, and our school did a low budget movie with him. But that's what he did in the 70s was, he would go out and shoot no permits. And
Yeah.
have you seen that documentary, A Decade Under the Influence?
No.
Oh, wow. That's a great documentary. It's just basically about kind of like the new Hollywood in the 70s, the
Okay.
auteurs, all that came out. But
A
that's what
Decade Under the Influence.
yeah, it's a great one. And it's got all the stars in it too, of the 70s. Like it's Scorsese's in it,
Okay.
Coppola. So yeah, that's how he did it, man. He just went out on the street, and I think John Carradine or Dennis Hopper was saying, when the cops came, we just took off, and
Yeah.
we shot a movie for 10 days, took 10 days off, shot another movie, and that's how they did it back then. And that's cool.
Yeah.
How did you get in? How did you just get into the industry? Was it just a friend that
Well,
and you
yes.
made that story?
So my buddy Cameron Fife and his writing partner Tyler, they star in the movie together, and it's like loosely based on their experience moving to LA. It was originally done as a play, and they long story, but it was going to be off Broadway. They signed the rights over, and the guy, I don't know if he died or was in had a heart attack and was in a coma.
Oh, wow.
So, and they had just started production on it. So basically that shut down, but they had this story, and, me and 4 other buddies, we were just out of college. Everyone was just kind of starting to make a little bit of money, and Cameron was doing some things in LA, had met some people, and everything just kind of pieced together. We kind of pieced it together. We got the camera from a guy that was shooting a film. So we got the Red had just come out. So
cool.
We got a Red, and then he was friends with Katrina, who was on 30 Rock, and so she was kind of starting to build her career. And it was they had met John Grice through a friend, and he was like, yeah, I'll come out for a couple days and shoot with you guys. So we kind of piecemealed it together, and the initial budget I think was 25 grand or something like that. All the actors were doing it for free. I think we paid John a little bit, whatever minimum was, just to get him there. And I think he was only there, like I said, for a day and a half. But I have a couple cool stories. We hung out with him all day, and he's a really, really good guy.
That's Uncle Rico, right?
Yeah, Uncle Rico.
Yeah.
So yeah, really it was just through my buddy Cameron, and then as having some of a business mind, I was kind of like in charge of trying to get that film sold. And Netflix was like super thirsty for content
No.
at that point. So we had to like check these boxes, and Netflix liked it. And so we made this super low budget film, and 6 months later, it was on Netflix.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a really good first experience.
Yeah.
The other films have definitely taken a little more effort to get out there as things have
Yeah.
changed in the industry, especially the last couple of years. But yeah, so I've just kind
Mm.
of, I have a day job, I got a 9 to 5, but when something comes up that I'm interested in or I really like or whatever, I'll either put a little money in or I'll help with the producing. And yeah, so that's kind of been my involvement.
Oh, that's great, man.
Yeah.
That's cool to hear because I think for me, it's been really kind of touch and go in terms of like when I'm doing stuff and then I won't do stuff and then I
Yeah.
and but I like I was telling you before, I think I told you, but I told somebody on our team that I tried to do a little short because I'm a big Stephen King fan.
Yeah.
And I had heard that they were doing well, it had come out, both episodes or both
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I heard that they were gonna do geez, I don't know why that happens. That they were gonna do Salem's
It
Lot.
really likes your story.
And, they were gonna do Salem's Lot, and I knew that, oh, you can't do it just with one movie, that you can't do
Yeah.
it justice. So what I
Yeah.
did was I typed out, I wanted to go to Netflix and pitch, gotta make this like a 3, 4, or 5 episode
At least.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I wrote the first 2 episodes, and I was like,
Okay.
"Okay, if I can get in there, because
Yeah.
dialogue-wise, I'm not that good, but I think everything else, I can get the gist of what I need to, the
Yeah.
descriptions and all that, and so that's what I was hoping, but it was just, it's just one of those things,
Yeah.
for me anyways.
Yeah.
But that's great to hear that you've kinda got into the industry and you're doing
Yeah.
well, sounds
I
like.
I I mean, I've dabbled. Let me put it
Uh-huh.
that way. Like the first film, I was definitely heavily involved, and then as my family has grown, and I'm in charge of my business fully now in the last 10
Yeah.
years. So I mean, I'll go down and I'll be around for a shoot or help out with some of the pre-production stuff, or offer my 2 cents when it comes to selling a film.
Yeah.
But that's been my involvement. It is something that if I end up doing something else, maybe I could get more involved.
Oh,
So
cool, cool.
yeah.
All right. Well, this week on the pod, we're gonna. The reason I brought you on today was because the new Mission Impossible
Yeah.
Final Reckoning was coming out,
Have you
and I
seen
thought it
it?
was. I haven't seen it yet, and I plan to because I
Yeah,
want to
me
see it
too.
on the. I want to see it on the big screen.
Me too.
But I wanted to kind of go back to the first one because there was a lot of content on the internet about either the last one or they were doing all of the movies and kind of rating them. But I
Hmm.
was a big fan of this is gonna be about the first Mission Impossible, which came out in
Yeah.
'96, which I was a huge fan of. I remember seeing this. I think I saw it 3 or 4 times in the theater. I was a big
Mm,
fan of this. And then when it came out on video cassette, I had the VHS, and
yeah.
for me, it was one of those movies where if I had a sick day or something where I was just kind of sitting around the house or something, I would just put this on, and then I could do some errands or whatever kind of in the background. But I always loved this movie. When was the first time that you saw this movie, or what's your
I
relationship
think
with this movie?
I remember seeing it with my dad in the theater. So I would have been, you said 96?
Yeah.
I was 13.
Okay.
So I remember seeing it. And then, like you said, in high school or whatever, if it was just on, it's one of those movies that you're like, you can pop in, watch a couple scenes, watch one of those cool action scenes. And, you don't really need to be too involved with it. But
Right.
it was interesting going back and watching it with like fresh eyes. And, this is the eighth movie that's coming out now. So they all sort of blend together, and you're like, which movie? I'll have to watch all the rest of them to figure out, which
Yeah.
scenes go to which movie. But, I mean, we'll get into these scenes, but obviously the two big action scenes, you're like, those are from that movie, right? Because
Right. Right.
those were like so kind of groundbreaking, unique, and like, those are just what, if you think Mission Impossible 1, you kind of remember the beginning, right? And then there's a twist and all that, but those two action scenes just always stand out.
Yeah. I think definitely. And to your point, which I think after 3, for me, they all kind of like
Yeah.
blend together. I can't remember which one was the one where he was on the building.
Yeah.
or when he was hanging off
And there's
the
that one that
airplane.
has that awesome motorcycle chase scene, like, through the
Yeah,
desert
yeah,
and stuff, and I was like, "God, which one is that?" You
yeah,
know?
exactly.
Like, number
Yeah.
6, number 5, somewhere in there.
Yeah, this one was like I said, it came out in '96, and then also so Tom Cruise had this come out in May, the weekend before Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah.
Then he has Jerry Maguire come out in December of this year. So
Wow.
he has these 2 movies, and I always think that, like, that is kind of in a nutshell, it's kinda like the 2 paths that he's taken in his career because he always
Yeah.
had I would say I mean, he did obviously the Top Gun and Days of Thunder before this, but I think I always feel like before this, he was the character actor of Tom Cruise that we all
Yeah.
and then this kind of s
Risky Business
yeah.
and, yeah, that
Because
more of
he
that.
worked with, so he worked with Coppola and The Outsiders. He worked
Yeah.
with Scorsese and Color of Money, Rain Man, Barry Levinson. So he was, and
Yeah.
Oliver Stone, Born on the 4th of July. So he had this kind of like, I guess, pedigree. The best word is like to working with these kind of auteurs.
Yeah.
And then after this, I feel like this kind of kicks off because even after this, he works with Stanley Kubrick and
That's what
Cameron
Chuck, yeah.
Crowe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think that it was this kind of kickoff of
Almost
this
like a
action Tom
dual
Cruise.
almost like a dual career, right? He's like this
Yeah.
huge action star, but also doing these other kind of, artsy films more
Yeah. And
in on the like, not on the side, but in conjunction with that.
right. And
Yeah,
I think that was kind of the I guess the path because I remember in the 80s, especially with Top Gun, I really loved that movie.
of
But
course.
the roles that he took after that were really interesting, and again, he was working with these directors, these top-notch directors. And then in the early 2000s, I think it kind of after Vanilla Sky, I feel like he kind of went I mean, of course, he did Valkyrie and all that kind of those things,
Yeah.
but he just shifted to straight action, I feel like.
Yeah.
Even the science fiction stuff he did in the 2010s was
Yeah, like
kind of
Minority
weird.
Report
Yeah.
and, yeah,
Steven Spielberg, yeah.
those are pretty heavy action.
Yeah, and, I don't know, what do you think? Do you think this, do you have a preference in either, like, either or genre, like, Tom Cruise action or Tom Cruise more the character actor?
I mean, he's so good,
Yeah.
like, there is, like, he's obviously, got this other side to him that nobody really
Right.
sees, which
Right.
is a little weird. But I mean, as
Yeah.
far as his acting, he's even in this, like, he clearly steals the show. There's other great actors in this movie, but
Yeah.
he's so good, and like, so charismatic throughout the whole film, as he is
Oh,
in all
yeah.
his roles.
Yeah. Charisma,
Um,
he's got loads of that, yeah.
but you know, just in naming some of those other films you're talking about, I'm like, God, he's so good in all, like, Color of Money's so good in that movie.
Yeah.
I,
Oh
I
my
mean,
gosh. It's one of my
uh,
favorites.
yeah. So it's hard to say, but I would say, if I had to pick, I would go with the other films just because, he's limited in the Mission Impossible films
Yeah.
as to how much he can really do, but I mean, he does a lot. There's a lot of action, obviously,
Yeah.
that he's pulling off on his own.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of been the MO of sort of his last, I would say, like 15, 20 years is just that he at some point he just kind of said, I'm going full action with
Yeah.
where I can kind of um go balls to the wall and do these crazy and have these crazy action pieces in my
Hmm.
movies. And he did it night and day, which I have only seen a couple times, which I was not a big fan of, but
Yeah.
even movies like that or with Oblivion, and there's footage of him doing these stunts, and I think that that's what he kind of gravitated towards.
Yeah.
Also, he did this. He one of the actors from A New Girl, that sitcom. I never watched it, but
Oh yeah, I
he,
watched that show.
yeah. So he did a movie, Tom Cruise, The Mummy, in 17,
Yep, I
and
saw that.
he
Not
ended up,
great, but yeah.
yeah, right, but he ended up having, he was saying, "Yeah, I don't want to do this movie. I want to because I don't want to be doing all the stunts and all this." And so Tom Cruise was like, "Okay, well, if he doesn't want to be in this movie. He has to fly to London and tell me to my face." And so he's like, "Okay, cool." So they flew him out, and he ended up doing the movie. But
Yeah.
in the point of trying to convince him, he was like, "Tom, why don't you do more movies like character stuff?" And he was like, "Just because it doesn't do any money overseas." And
Yeah.
so when I heard that, it kind of clicked and it made sense as to why. Because off of this movie, he
That was
forego he
Jake Johnson, by the way. I just Googled
Jake
it.
Johnson,
Yeah.
that's the dude. And in this movie, he went without a paycheck and he ended up just getting back end stuff. And he ended
Yeah.
up making about $70 million off of
Wow.
the original Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
So I think that that's what kind of drove him. I mean, I would assume I'm not going to speak for him, but I would assume that that's kind of like, oh, okay, there's something to be said here about,
Yeah.
overseas markets and all that kind of stuff. But I would like to see him, come back and do a movie
Do
that's
something else. Yeah.
yeah, that's something kind of character driven.
Well,
I just missed that.
maybe now that the Mission Impossible series is over, maybe that'll
Yeah.
open that back up. Plus, I mean, how old is he? He's mid
He's
60s.
like 62,
Yeah.
64, something like
Yeah.
that.
So, I mean, how long can you keep doing these stunts for, really?
Well, he says he wants to keep doing like
Yeah.
yeah, I saw an interview recently and they were like, "This is the last movie, but you say that you still can make a better one?" And he was like, "Yeah, oh yeah, always.
Wow.
Always, man. I want to be doing action films until I'm 100,
Wow.
And so it's like, "All right,
Well,
cool,
with
man."
that Scientology stuff, maybe he will.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. I think that's the trade-off. I mean, I think a lot
Yeah.
of that's why the rumor was that he fell out with Steven Spielberg because he did War of the Worlds and then he did Minority Report or
Yeah.
flip that. But yeah, and I think after that they had a falling out because of the Oprah thing, and then that video leaked about with him getting that award from the
Yeah.
Scientologist,
Yeah.
and
There
so
there is
that's
a little
that's a rub.
Scientology note in Mission Impossible too. I don't know if you wanna jump into that, but while we're
Go for
on
it.
it,
Yeah.
so the train scene, apparently, and this is just something I read that, I think it was the French government wouldn't
Mhm.
let him use their train because they're like, have some sort of anti-Scientologist
Oh,
policy.
yeah, I heard that too. Read that. Yeah.
So, he ended up having to, I don't know, he had to go have dinner with somebody or something to get them
Yeah.
to let them use his
Yeah.
train. I don't know if it was the French government or a different government
It was the
that
people
ended up.
that ran the transportation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, so he
and
ended up
yeah,
having to, like, go directly to them and
yeah,
not go through the government. So,
yeah, and they ended up, granting him permission, and that
yeah,
which was cool.
yeah,
But yeah, that's you hear like these crazy stories out of that, and that's
yeah,
and I think that's for me has been kind of the rub, I guess, in the Tom Cruise stuff because
yeah,
I love him as a movie star, but it's just I wonder how much of that kind of go kind of alienates him or kind of polarizes him to maybe people in his inner circle. I don't
yeah.
know. But
Well, I mean, it's kinda like the Michael Jackson thing, right? You love
yeah,
the music, but not the
yeah,
man, right?
right.
And, so that's why, I'm so torn with him with Cruise too, right? Like,
Yeah.
this I mean, think of all the movies he's made and how awesome he is, and then there's, like, this whole other thing to him, like, if you watch that video of him getting the award, you're like, "Man, this is so weird."
Yeah.
And obviously, if you've seen any of those documentaries about
Yeah.
Scientology,
Yeah.
it's a little out there.
Yeah, it is. And it's yeah. I mean, it's we could probably do the whole podcast on how
Yeah.
weird that is. But yeah, so yeah, Mission Impossible comes out 1996 as Brian De Palma.
Yep.
And let's see, the writers are David Kep and Steven Zillian and Robert Town, which Robert Town did Chinatown and The Last Detail and Heaven Can Wait. He was also in that Decade End of the Influence. He's in that a couple
Oh,
times,
okay.
talking about how they made Chinatown and
Mm,
all that. But yeah, so I guess Cruise, he did a couple things with Cruise. He did he wrote The Firm, adapted The Firm for
okay.
Cruise,
Yep.
and then Days of Thunder, he came in as a writer, and then he
Mhm,
did this movie and then sequel part two. So I mean, he has Cruise is at this point he has the ability to kind of put together an all star team in
mhm.
terms of how to make this movie. So he brings on De Palma after having dinner with Steven Spielberg and Brian De Palma one night, and decides after a 14-hour marathon of De Palma movies, says, "Okay, De Palma's going to direct this one." But
Hmm.
there was rumors that they didn't really get along, which I can
Yeah,
kind of see. Have you
yeah,
heard anything about that?
yeah, and I mean, just makes sense because this is the only one he does, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So, yeah, apparently they had a lot of battles throughout, and I wonder if that's why the movie's a little choppy, after
yeah,
rewatching it. there's like, I also read that they wrote the two action scenes, or the action scenes were the like what they started with,
Right.
and then wrote the script around that, which you
Yeah,
can
that's what
totally
yeah.
see that, right? They're
Yeah.
like, okay, we got these two awesome scenes, and now let's write this movie around that. And I think, as good of a movie as it is, it's not a great movie
Right,
because of that,
exactly.
you know.
Yeah.
So
And I think that I just saw another interview recently, probably in the last 2 weeks, where he's talking to somebody. I think he was over in London talking to a crowd of people, and he had a moderator. And he was explaining how the one where they made where he's crawling on the big tall building, the Burj
mhm.
Khalifa.
Yeah,
And he said at one point they had it all set up, the action piece is all set up, and they were like, okay, so how do we get here? How do we write the scene? So he
yeah,
calls up McHugh, which has done all the movies since then,
yeah,
and he writes the spectacular scene that happens all in that building. So I feel
yeah.
like, and then he says to the crowd, he says, sorry to burst your bubble, guys, but that's pretty much how big movies are made nowadays. It's
Yeah,
hard to see, or it's easy to see that, like, oh yeah, that's probably how he does a lot of his movies,
yeah.
because like you were saying, to your point, like De Palma had all the action sequences, but they just didn't have the story about how to connect them.
How to connect them? Yeah. So
Yeah,
I mean, they end up making it work, but
yeah,
you can tell it's like it's a little funky,
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, but it's, unfortunately, I feel like that's a lot of how even the Marvel movies and DC is
Oh yeah,
kind of made nowadays. Because I
yeah,
feel you heard the stories about Iron Man and how they didn't have a fleshed out script, and so Days would, John Favreau would be calling, hey, his buddies being like, hey, we need to have a problem with this plot point. How do you do this? And there's a story goes that Jeff Bridges was getting pissed at the beginning, but then he realized, oh, wait a second, like this is just a multi-million-dollar student film, and so he
yeah,
got to have fun and
yeah.
reframed it that way. But I just feel like that's how movies are made nowadays.
Kind of doing it all. Well, you come up with this big scene, right, and then just work everything else around it.
Right, kinda like reverse engineer the whole thing,
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, let's see, what's the Ascension? Sequel, Cruise. Oh, and so this is, yeah, so this is another thing, was that this was his first, production, because he had just put together
Yeah,
a production company with,
yeah,
Paul Wagner, and this was their first movie.
yeah.
And so the thing I want to talk about too now is kind of the way De Palma films. I don't know. Are you a big fan of Brian De Palma, or have you seen a lot of his films?
Untouchables is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of the techniques that he uses in this movie is a lot other than that, and
yeah,
in Scarface, but he always uses that split focus where he
yeah,
has the person in focus here, but then also in the back.
yeah,
And he also uses a lot of POV, the point of view
yeah.
oneers, where they're walking around a big room.
Hmm.
He does that in Snake Eyes too, which is the movie I think he does. I think after this, I want to say,
Okay.
with Gary Sinise and Nicolas Cage.
Oh, I mean, terrible movie, but great movie at the
Yeah,
same time.
right. It's good scenes in it.
Yeah, yeah,
And so, yeah, we already talked about like the what is the action pieces,
yeah.
but in particular, I wanted to talk about the glass walled restaurant scene.
That's my favorite scene.
Yeah, dude, that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
What's your impression of that?
Well, I mean, that whole, he walks into this thing and, you kind of see the people in the background and it's this big meeting, everyone's just died. And you're like, and then he pieces it together, that everybody else there were the agents that were at the other place, which is awesome. And
Yeah, that is.
it also has my favorite quote in the movie, which is, "You've never seen me very upset." And then, he does the gun thing and
Yeah,
throws it. And it's also where we meet Kittredge, who's the other character that's in all the other movies
yeah,
besides what's Ving Rhames' Luther.
yeah. Luther,
So
yeah,
just a classic scene,
yeah.
Other than the two action scenes, it's the scene that everyone knows in that movie.
Well, and it's interesting too, because I feel like that scene was the scene that really kind of gave you insight into how Ethan, his character, or Tom Cruise's character,
Yeah,
Ethan is very observant and his abilities. And so that's the first
yeah,
scene I think that kind of, because he says, "Follow, if can you follow me around the room?" And the drunk
yeah,
couple on
yeah.
the embankment.
Bow
You know,
tie behind you,
yeah,
yeah, and it flashes back to
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. So now on repeated viewings, that
Yeah.
first scene where they're doing, they're trying to get Galixian the knock list or whatever.
Yes. So now you're looking for
Now
those
you
people.
yeah, now you can see all the things that they point out, and that's great. Let's see. So yeah, that's my favorite too, and that's
Yeah.
partly why I think this movie kind of has that gravitas, because I think De Palma wanted to do that with a stuntman, and then he saw that it didn't really look.
Yeah.
He needed Cruise in there, and this is an interesting thing because I read this article that said that initially Cruise didn't want to do the stunt. He was like, "Oh, let's hand it off to the stuntman. They know what they're doing." And De Palma did that, and then it said, it just doesn't.
Doesn't look right.
It doesn't look right. We need you in there, and he explained to him what the shot was going to be. I feel like that was the kind of genesis of
Maybe him starting to do it all. Yeah.
yeah, because I feel like now he has his own stunt team, and
Yeah.
the Academy just announced they're going to start doing awards for stunts.
Oh,
So I think that there's that old story, or not old, but there's a story when Matt Damon was having dinner with him, and Matt Damon was like, they were talking about the Burj Khalifa scene where he's on the side of the building, and Matt Damon's asked him, How did you do that scene?" He's like, "Oh, this is great. All right, this is how we did it. All right, so I went to my stunt guy and I said, I want to do this," and he describes the stunt to him, and he says, "I want to do this," and the stunt guy says, "Oh, no, 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 that's not possible." All right. And so then I got rid of that guy. I got a new stunt guy. And so I feel like that was kind of this
so
was
you
kind of
find the guy that says,
yeah,
"This is how you do it." Yeah.
yeah. So I think that this was kind of the thing that kind of kicked it off. I feel
Yeah.
like anyways, because after hearing those stories, um, so then let's see, key scenes. You got any favorite scenes in the movie
Well,
you want to
one
talk
thing I
about?
wanted to say, which I thought was interesting,
Yeah.
the fact that it's 96, and this is like, if you think about it, just like, I'm looking like big picture, we're not like, for the first time, we're not in the Gulf War, right? And 9/11 hasn't happened yet. So it's this kind of sweet spot, and this ends up being like, why the mole is created, right? Because Jim feels like he doesn't have a place in the world. There's no war going on, right? The
Right.
Cold War's over. He's in this weird like frame of time where there wasn't a whole lot to be fighting
Yeah.
against, right?
Right. Right.
So I just thought it was interesting because all the other movies, I don't know when the second one comes out. I think it's also before 9/11.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
then,
Yeah.
everything else is like terrorist driven,
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah.
All these like bad, really bad terrorist plots. And this one isn't. This one is
Right.
just a mole hunt because they're bored,
Right.
basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just thought that was like, I hadn't thought about that until I rewatched it.
He doesn't fire a gun in this movie,
He
does he?
doesn't.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
no.
so that's another interesting, that's a good
Yeah,
point too, because I think a lot of movies that come out in this time and kind of, I can't really think of one. I mean, maybe Courage Under Fire, but that's even a flashback to
yeah,
the first invasion, but I mean, yeah, you're right. I never thought of it that way. I think even 2 is about a virus, and that comes
yeah,
out in, I think, 99.
yeah. Okay.
But, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Excellent point. Let's see,
Another, I mean, just that Emilio Estevez is in it, which
oh,
I
yeah.
had totally forgotten. And then when he popped, I was like, oh, that's right, he's this guy. And at the time, he was a pretty big star, I guess.
Yeah.
So it just I made me think of like Emilio
Yeah.
from what is it, Night at the Roxbury? Yeah.
Well, I think him and Cruz go way back too because they
Okay.
were buddies. Cruz did a cameo in Young Guns,
Okay.
and,
Yeah, that would make
yeah,
sense.
and,
Yeah, they're probably the same, similar
yeah,
age.
at the end where they're stuck in the house and there's the shootout, and you can kinda it's Cruz is just one of the nameless dudes that gets shot.
Okay.
But, yeah, and so I think that they went back, they did The Outsiders together. I think
Yeah.
that's probably where they met, but, yeah, it was good to see him in this one. His uncredited role. Do you
Yeah.
know how that works?
I saw that this morning and I didn't have enough. I was like, why would he be uncredited? That doesn't make any sense. Like
Right. I
maybe.
always wonder how that works because, Darren McGavin, the dad in The Christmas Story,
Yeah.
he was in The Natural, and he had an uncredited role, and I because he wanted to be billed like one of the top billing, and they were like, "No, it's it's Redford and
Yeah.
whoever," and so he's like, "All right, just take my name off." And I always wonder how they if why
Yeah.
or how
Maybe
that's
it's a dis
possible.
is it a dispute that causes
Yeah,
that? Or
or do they still get the same amount of money?
yeah,
I don't
I don't
know.
know. I don't know
Yeah,
how that
I
works.
don't know this either.
Yeah.
Any other scenes? I got a Langley scene, the one that, they break into Langley and
Yeah.
get the actual knock list. That's another
Well,
classic.
and the whole like, they drug the guy so that he has to be in the bathroom the whole time, and
Yeah,
there's that
yeah,
awesome scene where he comes back and Cruz is like dangling above him. I mean that again, that's one of the two scenes that they had that figured out, and you
yeah,
can tell because it's so well done. They're
man.
they're creeping through the air duct and the guy's holding him and he's like
Yeah,
straining.
and then the mouse come
Yeah,
or
the
the rat,
mouse. Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, the rat. Yeah. I mean, that scene is awesome.
And I always feel like there was minimal kind of I feel like it was the
Real.
sound on yeah, real, like, it was on
Yeah,
set, it was
yeah,
practical, and you see the outtakes of that, and you see him, like, he's just dangling, and then his feet will touch or his hands will
yeah.
touch and, obviously cut. But I heard that when they the scene that they get when he's balancing, De Palma kinda milked it, and Tom Cruise is like, "Jesus, what the hell?" And De Palma's finally like, "Alright, we got it." But you could tell
Yeah.
just the tension in that scene.
I read he had to put coins in his shoes,
Oh,
Tom Cruise,
really?
to wait because when they would drop him, his head would, because he's
Yeah.
heavier towards that, so his head kept hitting. So he figured out he had to weight his shoe, so they put like coins or something
Oh,
in
wow.
his shoes,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
that balanced the weight out so that he was flat when he bounced.
That makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's cool. That's a cool scene. That's probably the scene too. But the scene before that, when they're in the train and they're introducing Luther Stickle and I forget Jean Reno, whatever
yeah.
his name was in the movie. I forget
Krieger.
Krieger. That to me, when I was a kid, so I was living with a couple people. We had this nice house out here in Santa Rosa, and we would always have we would always quote it, and I can't remember the quote, but I remember a little bit of like top of the line crypto,
Oh yeah,
something like that.
I know.
But we would always like out and about, we would always
Yeah,
say those lines to each other.
the
It was fun.
crypto. Oh, another like that reminds me, just thinking about this, the when he's like sending the email to Max, and it's
Yeah.
like this like very early email system, and
Yeah.
he's like trying all these different, and you're like, it's like the little letter comes up and it shoots off. You're like, oh my god, this is like
And
so
the
basic, you
the
know?
the alert when he gets the email is like beep beep beep
Yeah,
beep beep
yeah,
beep.
yeah. It's like
Like
a big
what?
deal. Yeah.
Yeah. That was they had a deal with Macintosh to have Macintosh paid like 15 million
Okay.
for its product to be
Yeah,
used.
because you definitely see that apple sitting there.
Yeah, and yeah, it was 96 was the first year I even heard of the internet. I
Yeah.
remember a girlfriend of mine at the time was I have my Pearl Jam shirt on, but
Mm.
I was trying to learn some song and she goes, "Why don't you just look it up?" I was like, "Look it up where?"
Yeah.
She
In the
goes,
library.
"The internet.
Yeah.
You never heard of the internet?" I'm like, "I've
Yeah.
heard of it, but I don't know." So we went in her mom's office. It was like, "Dip, dip, dip, dip."
Yeah.
I was like, "Whoa!" And yeah, so this is like the birth of the internet, or not the birth,
Yeah.
but like the early iterations of it.
Yeah.
Did you ever use Netscape Navigator?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
That was
Yeah,
God,
and,
that's such a
the AOL, the classic,
yeah,
mail, I mean, yeah,
yeah.
I was like, yeah, LimeWire, that I was just, like I said, 13 and 96,
Oh,
so
nice.
this was all,
Yeah.
I was into it for sure.
Fuck yeah. And then
One other scene, and
yeah,
I'll just say she kinda, one of the people that, like I said, I mean, Tom Cruise obviously stands out. Ving Rhames is great, but
yeah.
the lady that plays Max, I don't know if I,
Vanessa Redgrave. Yeah.
yeah, she's that, like, I hadn't remembered it until I watched this week, but she's really good in that movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like her and Cruise are kind of flirty,
Yeah.
and
Great chemistry.
yeah, great chemistry, and she's great later on in the later scenes too. She's just kind of gone from the story after this,
Yeah.
right? I assume she
Yeah.
gets arrested, and that, but she was
Well,
really good.
yeah. Well, no, she
Does she
was
come back?
in Kitcher. Well, her daughter comes back in, I think
Okay.
like in episode 6. I don't know what movie that is, but
Okay.
the one with Henry Cavill is in.
Oh, yeah.
Her daughter comes back. But at the end, McKittrick, is that his name?
Kittredge.
Kittredge was like, "Oh, well, I think we can leave the courts out of this." So
Mhm.
I think that they kind
Like,
of
put her in the fold or something.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and they just don't, she gets
yeah.
I think she gets away, but, yeah, she's great, and she's also great in did you ever see that movie Deep Impact?
Yeah,
Did you like that movie?
yeah, that's a great
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
yeah, I preferred it over Armageddon.
It's like those 3 there's another one, that came out at the same time, right? Like 3 apocalypse movies, like, right
Uh,
at the same time.
yeah, it was Independence Day? Is that the one you're thinking
Well,
about?
no, but,
No.
there's Armageddon, Independence Day, and then the Gyllenhaal one is right around then too.
Oh, 2000,
The Day After Tomorrow, is
Day
that what it
After
is?
Tomorrow,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
That was in 2000, I think 2 or 3. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, those, I'm a big, a fan of those types of movies.
yeah,
But yeah, those she was in Deep Impact, and she was really good in that too. Um, let's see, and then, yeah, of course, the ending train scene.
yeah,
I mean, that was, that's always gonna be remembered, I think, because I think even just setting it up, Cruise has to go and convince the people to let him use the train. But a lot of that was filmed in Pinewood in London. The studio gets a green screen, when they're on top and
yeah.
he clips the helicopter in there. But
Did you
then
read about the wind
what was
system?
that?
Did you read
Yeah.
about the wind? Like, they couldn't get it right, he wasn't happy with it, and then they found I guess he had done some, skydiving or
Yeah.
something. So
Yeah.
he's like, "Oh, there's a machine," and they found the one that was in Europe and bought it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I thought that was a cool little side note that they were like, "Alright, to get this right, we gotta buy this one thing."
Well, that's the thing with him producing. I think that,
Yeah.
his name, because I mean, I would think you probably know more than I do, but it's like once you lock in your budget, is it hard to get more money? I mean, I would, because with the name Tom Cruise, I think Banks would just been like, "Oh yeah, sure."
Yeah, I mean, I'm not flying in this world,
Yep.
obviously, but
Yeah, yeah.
you can always add on if you're,
Okay.
especially if you've got some early stuff shot,
Oh, yeah.
then you can go out and say like, here's this, and then here's our idea, but we need, for them, they probably needed, we need
Yeah.
an extra 15 million to get this, to
Yeah.
what it needs to be. So, I mean, I assume they probably didn't have too hard of a time, especially with
Yeah.
the name Mission Impossible and everything behind it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I heard rumors that this was like 62 to 65 million initially, and then it ballooned up to 80 million.
yeah,
And, then that was I guess that ended up well for all of them, but, um, yeah, so they did the train scene, and that was the big thing I think in the trailer too, leading up to this movie was that explosion of the helicopter that blows him back onto the train.
it was
That
just,
shot was unheard of at the time.
yeah, it, so I have mixed emotions about this scene
Yeah,
because there's some definite holes in it,
right.
which I don't know if you want to talk about that right
Yeah, go
now.
for it. Go for it.
Okay, well, one of the things when I watching the movie, I'm like, Jim shoots his wife, and then just like Tom Cruise gets knocked out, and he's like, okay, I'm just gonna leave him knocked out and
Right.
like go try and like jump off this train into this helicopter in a tunnel.
Right.
Like, why?
Yeah.
Why? Like, just shoot him, and
Yeah.
then the movie's over.
Exactly. Well,
It doesn't
yeah.
really make sense. I like watch it like, what?
Well,
Yeah,
that's the thing with what was that? When he's sitting there because, Jim, the Jim, evil Jim is, like, watching the whole thing go down when Tom Cruise is sitting there acting like him
yeah,
and
yeah,
his wife, and it's like, you could just get rid of him right before that.
yeah, yeah. It doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
And
There was another go ahead, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna just say there was another kind of plot hole that in the beginning, but I didn't write it down, and I thought I was gonna remember it, but I didn't. But yeah, there's a couple of them in there that
Yeah,
make me think, "Okay."
and they're like when he's reliving the kind of how everybody dies in the
Yeah.
beginning. You never really find out how the wife got out, and like I guess you find out that Jim is the one that blows up the car. But there's definitely some things where you're like, this doesn't totally.
Oh, yeah, for me, it was when they go to Langley in Virginia, and I guess my thing is, I guess Luther made it so when they call or the alarm goes out, it just goes to them, but to
Yes,
think that there's only 4 firemen or 3 firemen,
yeah, for
and
all of
then
Langley.
that's it, and it's like
Well, so I was just like, as far as the train scene goes, it's
yeah,
awesome. It's what you
yeah,
one of the things you remember,
yeah,
obviously. But like he risks, he blows up this helicopter and like just I guess
jumps,
plans on
yeah,
like exploding back to the train. It's
and he
like
doesn't get hit by the propellers, that's
yeah,
another thing I
yeah,
was
yeah,
looking at. I was like, if he's jumping, he has to go up a little bit. He can't just go straight. But
Doesn't necessarily make sense, but
right.
okay, it's an
But
action
it
movie.
looks good.
It looks
And
good. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and I think that was in the trailer, so that whole movie, you're at least I was
yeah.
like,
You're waiting for that.
yeah, like
Yeah,
how does this happen? Where's that? And then when it
yeah,
finally goes in, I was like, oh, here we go, here we
yeah,
go.
yeah.
So yeah, that was actually perfect. Another thing I want to talk about was the soundtrack. The
Mm.
soundtrack was great, and I think I surprised, or maybe I forgot, but Danny Elfman does the
Yeah,
soundtrack to this.
I had no clue until I was, like I said, doing some research. I'm
Yeah,
like U2 is doing the
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty cool.
I remember them. They won. I think they won a Grammy or they won some
Yeah,
sort of award. I think
apparently it
maybe
was on the
MTV.
top of the charts for
Yeah,
weeks.
yeah. They did remixes and stuff of it.
Yeah,
But what surprised me was Alan Silvestri was supposed to do it, and he did about 20 minutes of music, and then he got fired. Which
yeah.
he did, Back to the Future. He does a lot of Robert Zemeckis films, but he also did Predator too, which
Mm.
I always tell my friend who I do this podcast with, like I always tell him, like if you watch Predator and you watch Back to the Future, there's such a similarity to, even though they're completely different movies, similarity in the music cues of those two movies is
Mm.
just it's weird. But yeah, I didn't know I forgot that Danny Elfman had did this. And when I was watching it, I thought, oh, this sounds like Danny Elfman because it really did sound like kind of his style. I don't know if you were familiar with his style, but he just does this little quirky kind of things. But he also did Good Will Hunting around this time the next year
Mm.
too. So yeah, I thought that was great. Yeah, and so I think I came up with this category. Let
Okay.
me see. Oh, where is it, man? Shit. Of kind of the Clay Thompson six game award,
Okay.
which is it's like a cameo or like a secondary character that
Yeah.
kind of takes over the scene when they come in. Do you have a recipient of this award?
For me, it's Vanessa Redgrave.
Yeah, oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. Just
Yeah,
because those scenes she's in are so good.
yeah.
And I wouldn't have thought that. And, we haven't even talked about John Voight being in this,
Oh, yeah,
but,
that's right. Yeah,
but
yeah,
he's not all that great, really.
yeah,
I mean, he just kind of plays, like a sleazy old, CIA boss, but like,
yeah,
he's just okay to me. It is cool that like Ving Rhames like gets introduced and he's in the rest of them. And like I said, with the Kittredge character, you kind of hate him throughout all the movies, right?
yeah,
He's always in the background as like
yeah.
this shady CIA guy. But yeah, if I had to give it to somebody, I would definitely give it to the Max character. I think
That's yeah.
she's
That's a
she's
good
cool.
choice.
Yeah. How about you?
Mine was the Donlo character, the guy that gets sick.
Oh yeah,
Because I mean, that guy is just a hapless dude.
yeah,
He gets he runs that department or he runs that computer.
yeah. He's the only one that has access
Yeah,
to that room or whatever.
and he plays, and I guess he shows up in the new one too.
Oh really?
Yeah, the final whatever
Oh
the final
cool.
movie.
All
But
right.
yeah, that dude, he just makes me laugh, and he just seems like the typical kind of computer nerd type of
Yeah,
dude, which I
CIA
am too. So, but
bureaucrat. Yeah.
yeah,
And
and
he's
so
so good that it like makes that scene believable, right?
yeah,
Like this
yeah,
guy's
yeah.
having stomach problems and
And
I guess
Kittredge was well. Go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say also the Claire character who doesn't totally make sense that she's married to
Right, right.
the this old guy because she's pretty good looking and
Yeah,
way younger obviously, but
right, right.
she's good in that scene too where she like like I think she bumps it or like sits right next to him and like sneaks the whatever the poison is
Yeah,
into his drink.
yeah,
But yeah, that's a good one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And what was I gonna say? I forget. All right. Anyways, yeah. So that's my yeah.
That's your Clay
Yeah.
award.
That's my Clay Thompson award. That was cool. Let's see if there's anything else you wanted to talk about. Anything else I didn't bring up?
Um,
Because I pretty much went through all my notes.
yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much the major stuff that stood out to me. I
Yeah.
think what's interesting is that I read there was a lot of backlash from the fans because the Jim character was like beloved in the
Yeah.
original show.
Yeah.
And he turns out to be the bad guy in this, and like he says, it's this failed operation, right, that was really just to find out who the mole was, and that's
Right.
what like kicks off this 8 now movie franchise.
Yeah.
So this one's like very set apart than the other films, because
Yeah.
there really isn't, the bad guy is one of the guys in the in the crew, I
You're
guess.
right. Well,
So it's
that
not some
was
shadowy figure. It ends up being
yeah.
Jim. So
Well, that was the thing was that they originally wanted the original cast, some of the original cast in this,
yeah,
and what they were gonna do was what they initially did or what they ended up doing with the cast that they had was that they were gonna kill them all off.
yeah, and start
And
fresh.
yeah, and then so the guy that played Jim in the original TV series was
Didn't
like,
want to do it,
yeah,
right?
didn't wanna do it,
Yeah,
and he said, "You guys coulda just said, had me in there saying like, 'Okay, I'm retiring,
yeah,
bye,'
yeah.
and, I woulda come and I've done it, but
Done
to have
that.
me as the villain." And so they
Yeah,
all disavowed it. They all were just like, "Nah, this
yeah.
is."
Disavowed it. Nice.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think and it just kicks off a cool movie. I'm not a big fan of the second one because it just to me, it was more of a team thing, and I
Mhm.
understand Tom Cruise has to kind of be the point man, but,
Yeah,
just didn't really get into that at all. But have you
yeah.
seen I think MTV did a little spoof where they had Ben Stiller as Tom Cruise's, stuntman. Have you seen that one?
I'm sure I've seen it, but yeah,
It's so funny. You gotta go back and watch that one.
go
But
back and
yeah,
check it out.
yeah, it was great. And, so you do plan on seeing the new one though?
Yeah, I do. I was gonna go last week, but the guy I was gonna go with ended up canceling. I was like, I don't know if I need to go
Yeah.
solo to go see
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And cool, man. Thanks for coming on, and,
yeah,
it's been a treat. If you wanna do this again, dude, you have a free invite, and
yeah.
if you
Let's
wanna
do it.
yeah, if you wanna talk about
Maybe
another
we'll
movie or something.
pick a comedy or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plenty of movies out there, or we could check out King Tide, and we can talk about that. If I
Yeah.
mean,
Let's do
although
that.
your
Yeah.
audience won't, maybe it'll get a couple more viewers on
Yeah. No, I'm
Amazon
sure it
Prime
would.
to check it out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll definitely do that. I'm gonna check it out for sure. Make sure you guys check out that movie, and I'll put links in the description about where you can
Okay.
find all your movies and stuff. So,
Cool.
yeah, thanks again, and thanks for
Yeah.
everybody that's listening and watching. And we'll see you again soon.
All
Thanks,
right. We'll
Sean.
do it again. Thanks.